Hey folks, so I've been asked to kind of sort of highlight my feelings about the commission lawsuits um, that has been going around, and there's an $85 billion lawsuit or $85 million settlement for one company and a $33 million settlement for another company, something like that. But what they're referring to is the Burnett Sitzer lawsuit. Um, and it was a significant legal case that was solved at the beginning of the month, in which uh, one of the largest trade associations, the National Association of Realtors, uh, including some of their contractors, were sued, such as some of the MLSs and whatnot, for collusion. And the collusion was that they were fixing prices as far as the as far as it was concerned. So first of all, in order for there to be collusion, it has to go through a couple of check marks. One is, were there multiple different organizations? Were there multiple different companies? Were there multiple different uh, uh, individuals who were colluding together in order to fix prices in a specific way? And look, I look online and I can tell you that there's going to be people who are going to say, oh, well, we never did anything like that. Well, let me tell you this. I'm licensed in three different areas: auctioneering, real estate, and are the two main. The the thing about it is that when you are licensed, you swear that you are going to uphold the code of ethics for a particular organization. With the National Association of Realtors, the reason why they lost this particular case is because they said, here is our book of how we play. This is completely optional. And then they handed it off to the MLSs. Okay, so here, Mr. MLS, here's the book. This is the playbook. This is what everybody needs to be on the level playing field. Now, we're not going to make this mandatory, but it's optional, but it's required. You can't have something optional that's required. So the MLSs and other organizations took that to mean that you have to have, one, required membership in the NAR. Two, you have to do what this handbook said, which was, if you are putting something into the MLS, you are required to have a blank check for the buyer side. So say, for instance, to make it easy, if I say that my commission is 4%, well, I was required to cut that in half and give it to the buyer's agent. And in essence, what this means is, Mr. Seller, if you contacted me, then I'm going to charge you 4% as my commission to the firm, because you're hiring the firm, you're not hiring me. Because if you're hiring me, I'd can the firm and I'd can the NAR. You're hiring my firm to sell your property at 4%. And oh, by the way, I have to take that 2% out of that, and I have to give it to the buyer side, or if somebody brings a buyer, I have to give them 2% as the optional required book here says that the MLS is put in place. To this day, I cannot go into the MLS and offer zero commission for a buyer side agent. I can do it for sub-agents, but I can't do it for a buyer side agent. So here's where it lies. When you are a seller and you're looking at me to sell your property, you and I have a contractual relationship or a fiduciary relationship in which you sign a contract with me, and I work in your best interest in order to sell your property according to what you say. And that contractual agreement is basically an employment agreement. And me being, quote unquote, an independent contractor, I can do my best to sell the property the way that I think that it needs to be sold. I just came up with a whole group of stuff that I do for sellers on a regular basis. I put it in a multiple listing service. I do an abc123 street.com.info website. It'll be the address with its own domain name. I do postcards to neighbors, and it might not even be a postcard. It might be just a flyer that I just stick door to door to say, hey, if you know anybody who's interested in buying this particular property, it's going to go up for sale. I do an email blast to 12,000 people or 12,000 other agents. I do an in-office communication to 84,000 other agents inside of our office. Flyers. We generate flyers, put them around the neighborhood, because you don't know who's going to walk in and say, oh, Aunt Bessie's going to be moving down from Pennsylvania. She's looking for a property. Well, oh, isn't that convenient? I found a property. Coming soon advertisements to agents. And a lot of people who are real estate brokers are stuck in this idea, this mentality of it's 1980 and there is no internet. Well, if that's the case, we would have a book that's just as, that thick on our desks, and we have to page through it because every day we would get a new one. And the funny thing is that the costs from getting one of those books to today, when everything's on the internet, it's almost identical. Except you don't have to pay for a book to be printed, and you don't have to pay for a book to show up at your front door. You actually go online. So there's no cost savings that has been had. Now, somebody will say, well, back when I was a real estate broker in 1964, we had to pay $98 per book in order to have our business run. Okay, well, I haven't seen that. My data shows different, but that's okay. So, Mr. Seller, you're contacting me, and we're going to sell your property for 4%. You agree to that. You sign the contract, and then on one of the sheets of the contract, it says, "Oh, by the way, on the buyer side, you agree to allow the firm to split my commission with the buyer side who brings you a buyer to sell your property." Some people say it's fair. Some people say it's not. Some people say it's not a violation of Sherman antitrust. And I just want to say, when I got into real estate and I started seeing all of these things happen and I saw all this other stuff happen, I wasn't too thrilled with it because my Sherman antitrust alarms kept going off left and right. But everybody was like, well, no, that's just how we do business. Well, how can you follow the code of ethics and then violate Sherman antitrust? Not sure how that works out. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So anyway, you're paying me 4%. I have to split it with the buyer side. And they lost the case because they said that a seller, and this is what one of the testimonies said, the seller shouldn't have to pay for somebody who's negotiating against them, which I kind of sort of agree with. And if you take a look at how this entire thing works out, it really is a level of collusion that the real estate NAR has gone to Congress in order to get exceptions to the rule. So you're Mr. Seller. Yes, I got a little S there. And you hire Mr. Selling Agent. And then a buyer's agent comes and says, hey, my buyer is going to pay me, or a buyer comes and gets a buyer's agent, and then the buyer's agent makes the contract, writes up the contract, gives it to the seller's agent, and then it comes back to the seller, and then all of a sudden the seller has to turn around and pay the buyer's agent half. That's how this worked out. So you know where the collusion came in? Collusion came in when, well, let's see, we're going to bid $50,000 above the price of the house in order to ensure that we have this. And then would it be okay if we did this, or what they call an escalation clause, which is Mr. Buyer here wants to put in an offer of $50,000 more. Okay, well, then our escalation clause says, oh, well, my buyer will put $500 more in over and over and over. And now we're starting to see these people they're upside down in their mortgage because they are well past what anybody would say it was worth. See what I'm saying? So now we have this collusion lawsuit, which that is why the NAR lost it. Not only that, but the NAR lost it when they put the CEOs on there saying, well, I don't see how that's collusion. Well, I've been around long enough where I've seen collusion. Even on Facebook, you see all kinds of garbage. List now for 5%. List now for 6%. List now for 7%. Well, we normally charge 8%. The trick is that, and this is what my broker in charge told me, and if it gets me in trouble, big deal, that buyer's agents demand 2.5% as far as their commission side is concerned, and we have to charge at least 6% in order to give the buyer's agents 2.5%, and that's quote unquote the standard that's going around where we are. Well, that's bullshit. I'm sorry, but it is. Because as an independent contractor, I should be able to say, hey, Mr. If you want me to sell your $1 million house, I'll be happy to do it for 2%, 3%, 4%, 1%, 0.5%, $10,000, a bottle of champagne. You tell me how you would like to pay me in order to sell your house, knowing that I have all of these expenses to market your house accordingly. Well, that's not good enough because now everybody wants their split. And guess what? In a $10,000 transaction, I only get $8,000 of it because I have to split it with the brokerage. And then everybody else gets their split as well. So before I get my payment on a $400,000 house, I'll be lucky to get $5,000 on a 2.5% split. Yeah, that's insane, isn't it? The math doesn't add up or anything like that. So just to let you know, there's plenty of antitrust behavior that's going on out there in Facebook and all these other groups and chats and whatnot. And the problem that I have is that you have real estate brokers who are like shocked that they got caught, or they were shocked at the verdict. And my take on that is that if you do the unethical thing, thinking that you're following the code of ethics, then chances are you probably were doing it unethically all the time that you were in there. That's like do not call list. People call do not call lists on a regular basis saying, hi, I'm Matt Price, and I am, just letting you know that I'm a real estate broker in the area, and if there's anything I can do to help you, please give me a call. Well, guess what? That's violation of the do not call laws. Believe it or don't. Sending letters to people who are on the do not mail list. There is a do not mail list out there. Door knocking when there's no soliciting signs in the neighborhood. Um, all of that is going on with the real estate brokers all over the place. So, it's important to not even act like you're not doing the antitrust stuff, because the antitrust stuff broke up Standard Oil. The antitrust stuff broke up Ma Bell. The antitrust stuff broke up AT&T. Um, and the antitrust stuff also broke up other companies, such as railways, and now they're all combining because they're not making any money. So the idea that you're doing something that is not working against the how should I say, uh, the agency that you have with your clients. I think you probably need a good, not NAR sponsored ethics class. So, going back to this, the way that everything's supposed to have laid out, and I can, if you want, I'll even add the forms to this, link to the forms. That's if I can get a link to the forms in wherever you're at. If not, let me know. I'll put them up on my website. So the whole thing behind this is that, Mr. Seller, if you tell me that you don't want to pay for a buyer's agency, then I put 0 in, and you initial it and sign it. And if the MLS or my brokerage has a problem with that, tough. Because my main purpose of doing this is to represent you and do what you ask, regardless of what anybody else says. If I do what the company says, then I am required to tell you that, well, we can't do 0 because our corporation requires X. And part of that is that entire, it's called a clear cooperation policy. And it's not clear, because I'm supposed to tell you that we're in collusion with somebody else, and then you're going to have to pay somebody in order to do that. To me, that goes well beyond the ethics issues. That just cracks that ethic right out of the ballpark. And the courts said it correctly. It was unethical. And here's the verdict. Now, suck it up and move on. Now, I'm not saying that there's not good real estate brokers out there. There are. And are there bad real estate brokers out there? Absolutely. There are some who have redlined because of race. There are some that have steered because of commission issues, such as if they see that real estate broker is only giving 1% to their client, or the buyer, the seller is only going to give 1%, then they steer people away from that particular house for a higher commission. Hell, there's people on Facebook that have excoriated me because I said that I would do it for 2.5% with no buyer agency fees. And they excoriated me, saying, well, I'll never send any of my people to your listings. Well, that's a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And not only that, but it's a violation of state law. Yeah. So don't act like you're innocent, because you are guilty. You're either guilty because your company or your brokerage has allowed it, or because of NAR policies that you're required to follow that are optional. So where am I going to go with this? I'm going to go with this as this. What will eventually happen is that with anything, the rules are going to change. And some of these diehard brokerages would prefer to be straddled by the court versus being proactive. And anytime that you're straddled by the court to do something, there comes a fee. In other words, what I'm saying is, you can be proactive and you can make the change, and then you can prove to the courts that you're making that change, or you can go to court, and court is expensive. And you can say, you could go and you could say, look, this is what the changes that we made. And these have been historically been accepted by other courts as suitable. Or you can go to court and fight like hell and still have to make the change because it's already been hammered down that there was collusion. That was the verdict. You can fight it all you want. Eventually it'll get to the Supreme Court, but still the law of the land is that they have been found guilty. The judge is going to say, you're found guilty, this is how much you pay. It was $1.78 billion, but because it was a civil case involving the Sherman Antitrust Act, it is going to easily be a 5.4 something million dollars, $1 billion, because they can get triplicate damages. And what that means is whatever, if it was $1.50, then it's going to be, well, let's make it easy. If it was $1 verdict, they're entitled to $3 in damages. So that being said, I've already made the decision that regardless of whatever happens, the NAR is not going to be high on my priority list to renew. And if the MLS says that you have to be part of the NAR in order to list on our things, then I don't need them either, because there's other options out there available that are suitable for my sellers. And if there's other issues out there, because as it is right now, the supposition is that they're going to have to, how should I say, give each individual broker a special assessment for their membership. Congratulations, your membership with us now has a premium, which now you have to spend. You do the math. 5.8 or 5.6 or something like that $1 billion divided by 1.2 million people. Well, that's what your special assessment is, because our insurance isn't going to cover it all. No. I've been doing this long enough where if you are guilty of malfeasance and you refuse to change, and you knew that you had malfeasance going on and you refused to even address it, that's on you. The ethics training that they give out, it's okay, kind of subpar, because it's like, well, you have this person who's doing this and that and the other. But then the real estate brokers who are taking it, I can tell you, we're just taking it just because. They were taking it because it was just a check mark so they can continue going and doing whatever business that they were doing. That's what 99% of them do. The other ones actually learn from it. And that's probably your new real estate brokers, etc. I'm making a ethics class for the Auctioneers Association of North Carolina. And it easily will turn into a 4-hour thing, because we're actually taking case studies directly from people who got because of ethics. So it's not it's not an auctioneer issue. It is not a real estate broker issue. It is not a used car salesman issue. It goes across all aspects of society. And what I mean by that is, you have poor ethics in healthcare. You have poor ethics in realty. You have poor ethics in car dealerships. You have poor ethics in auctioneers. You have poor ethics in doctors. You have poor ethics, as far as that's concerned, as your local fast food place. You have poor ethics online. You have all across the entire spectrum. So I offer many different choices as far as how to sell the house. Traditional real estate brokers will just do one, and they will do high pressure sales tactics in order to get that 6%, which buys into that conspiracy theory that they're violating Sherman Antitrust, and they're trying to lock you into paying for that Sherman Antitrust. Now, the second side of this is the buyer. And the buyer is going to be the person who is actually coming to the table with the money. And, some people are saying, well, the cost of of having the broker and whatnot is baked into the property. That's not always true. And the reason why it's not always true is because they will do something to the effect of a buyer's seller net sheet. And the seller net sheet will say, well, Mr. Buyer will have to have, $60,000. Well, let me put it to you like this. The Mr. Buyer owes $400,000 on his property, and he wants to make 25% profit. And then on top of that, there is the 5% commission. And then if the buyer wants inspections, well, let's say an inspection costs $850, and then securing a lost permit, well, let's say it's $550. Okay. So what they will do is they will start doing this, and they will create a seller net sheet. Then the price of the house is going to be baked in. But most people will just go to a CMA or NAR, RPR, or a realtor property source, or they'll do what we call a HAVSI, broker's price opinion. They won't actually do the work. They'll actually have a piece of software do it. And so far, 90% of the software ones that I've seen have pulled up the wrong data. Or like, the information that's in there is 7 years old versus today. And look, we have a $99,000 house that is appreciated over 20 years. It's now worth $325,000. And over the last 2 years, it appreciated 25%. Okay. The Realty Price Index is the Realty Price Resource is back at least 3 to 5 years. But here's the deal. Your tax assessment isn't, because they're basing everything on sales price. So these people who are jacking up everybody for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, I've seen one go for over $1 million above what the listing price was. Thank you so much for creating a problem with Mr. Joe Blow down around the corner, who is on a very limited income, owns their house, and now their property taxes are going to go up by 60% because you decided to go $1.5 million over what the listing price was. Or you allowed an escalation clause that basically blew them right out of the water. That's all on you. And not only that, but we're also going to start seeing 2007, people are going to start losing their houses because they have overpaid for a house that, and you have appraisers that'll say, oh yeah, check mark. Yep, it's worth it. In a hot market, but when it's a soured market and they have to go back and they see that their 8% interest rate is now, they could redo it for 2.5%, and they have to go and get it reappraised. And all of a sudden, that little check mark of $450,000 is now $380,000. They're going to be completely upside down in it. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Unethical Broker. I get a little upset. So, there's a buyer side of this. And the buyer side basically says, dear Mr. Buyer, you are hiring me to help you find a house, do the paperwork, keep you on task, ensure that all of the legal work is done. Real estate brokers ain't allowed to be lawyers, but they have to fill out attorney paperwork that half of it is garbage. They have stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff, and then requires you to sign additional addendums and whatnot that basically says the same stuff that you've already signed 3 other times. Mr. Buyer, you're going to pay me X amount. And if I can't go to the seller to get X amount, then you are the person who's going to pay me out of your pocket for that, and that will come out of your closing costs. A lot of people forget that. So what that means is the buyer, if you say, well, Mr. Buyer, my fee, my brokerage's fee is a standard 3.2%, or let's make it 3%, for me to help you buy a house. And we fill out all the paperwork, and we do all this, and we schedule all this other stuff, and we have a virtual assistant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If they only give like 1% or nothing, then the buyer has to pay that money out of their pocket to pay their buyer's assistant. I want everybody to understand. They claim that a real estate broker is a independent contractor, which is a 1099 employee. That's great. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. The freedom is there. It's beautiful. But you have brokerages, you have the NAR, and you have all of these other people who are telling the independent contractor what to do and what everything else is. And they got high dollar coaches for $6,500 a month. And oh, by the way, if you want any kinds of this, that, and the other, and it's going to be another $99 a month. Yeah. So on a buyer's side, be aware that probably after all of the lawsuits are settled, because there's one in South Carolina now that's for the same thing, and there's a couple others popped up in Illinois. There's a couple of others that are going on. Merle is one of them. Eventually, it's going to be, you've got one of two scenarios. Three. The first scenario is that the seller side pays for the seller side. The buyer side pays for the buyer side. So in other words, the buyer pays their brokerage, pays their brokerage, whatever their percentage is over here. The buyers, or the seller side or listing side over here, the seller will pay their broker out of theirs, but there will be no crossing the streams. There will be no cooperation agreement. Now, I want everybody to understand that the reason why this is a problem is because the Department of Justice under Trump took them to court for this very same reason, is that they thought that there was collusion that was going on with this particular group, and they were found guilty of it through the Department of Justice, and they were going to settle. And they settled, and the DOJ said, well, we're going to back off. And then just before Biden became president, the DOJ says, well, we might want to relook at this because we don't think that something's just still not right. Something is just making us grind. So the DOJ, after Biden became president, backed away from that agreement, and the NAR says, well, fine, you back away, we're still going to go this way. And that's where, okay, you are mandatorily now required to say how much you're going to put in the MLS for the buyer's agent. Well, now, instead of being able to say zero, everybody had to put in $100, 2.5%, $1, 15 cents, whatever. So it didn't make things better. It made things worse. So now I have a contract over here that says, Mr. Buyer side, you're going to pay me 2% in order to help you find a house and do all the work and go around and spend all the gas and go to lunch and find out what your needs are and all this other stuff. And then we're going to go over here, and then we're going to do all this other stuff. That's fantastic. Mr. Everett, thank you so much. That was an outstanding video that you did about it. However, the thing about it is that neither the real estate side of the house, either the buying side of the house or the selling side of the house, really does a lot of work that requires somebody to do it. And I'm going to say this, and a lot of people think that real estate brokers make a ton of money. And I'm going to tell you that there's a ton of real estate brokers out there that drive Maseratis who are about one paycheck away from being bankrupt. They make about $32,000 on average a year. And some of the $1 million people that they say, I'm a $1 million person and this, that, and the other. They sell luxury properties, but they don't sell Joe Blow's house in our neighborhood. Okay. So to me, as far as the buyer side is concerned, my job as a buyer side agent is to help you either buy at auction, which is help you understand the paperwork, fill it out, get it in, make sure that it is correct, help you with the traditional real estate sale, which is unlock the doors, show you around, ensure that everything is according to what you were looking for. Try to balance out what, if you're married, trying to balance out what both of you need, or if you have a partner, trying to figure out what one side wants and what the other side wants, and try to find that happy medium, just like you see on HGTV. Work with sellers that may have issues such as, oh, well, we have an unpermitted space that we built, which might be a shed out back, and it might even be a beautiful luxury addition to the house that was needed, but they had a contractor come in who said that they got the permits together and there's no permits whatsoever. So now we have to go find out where do we get those permits in order to get it permitted and inspected and certified for proper inhabitation. So you have that traditional real estate sale and all the stuff that we do behind there. And I can tell you, even on a new house, I'm always battling with the builders. As it is right now, I've got 4 people who bought houses that were brand new that I'm keeping track of the dates, because 3 months prior to them being in there a year, I'm going to remind them to get a house inspector in order to inspect the property so the builder can fix it before it goes out of warranty. They didn't do that for my house. And what we found out about my house was they didn't put drip pans at the back door, nor did they tell us that we needed to put in a storm door. So the entire floor rotted halfway around the kitchen and up the walls. So it's important that you have that real estate broker who's keeping that in track. And then you have people like me who keep track of off-market properties, which is a lot of what you see is we have a dartboard, a virtual dartboard, which we have off-market properties. And if that's something that somebody may be interested in, we can turn around and get those off-market properties, get those people into the off-market properties. Now, as far as for sale by owners are concerned, you folks are a special breed. Yes, you can do all of this by yourself. However, if you are at work and you get a phone call, don't scream at the potential buyer because they're calling and bothering you. That is all part of, well, I'm putting it up for sale by owner. You're going to get phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning wanting to know if it's going to be available to be shown at 8 a.m. the next day. Whereas, if you had somebody like me, I handle all of that. Now, I understand you don't want to pay a real estate broker 6% because it's absolutely ludicrous that you're paying 6% of your sale price to somebody who's doing that kind of thing. But understand, how much is your time worth? I'm not even going to go there with the NAR thing saying that, you would make more money with me than you would if you did it yourself, because they spit out a thing saying, well, you know what, if you paid a full service broker 4%, you would make more money than if you did it yourself, because you would lose $18,000 to $20,000. Come to find out, that wasn't entirely truthful, and that was a statistic that came from the NAR. However, my job is to take the phone calls, the nagging from people, uh, fielding information from potential buyers, and all that other stuff off of you. And I don't have to pay anybody. If you say you don't want to pay a buyer's agent, well, then I won't pay a buyer's agent. But that's just all part of the things that I do. Now, there's other things that you need to consider too, Mr. Buyer, and that's buyer side commissions. Any inspections that you want to do beforehand, it's always good to get an inspection, because if you have an unethical inspector who shows up and says that your light switch is on upside down and it holds up a $400,000 sale because the light switch is not upside down, but he was just being a jerk, then that's on you. Curb appeal. I've got a very, very good young man who started his own landscaping company right out of NC State. And he is very reasonable with everything, and he can make it sparkle on the outside, because within the first 7 seconds of people arriving, it's either a yes or a no. Believe it or not, they don't even get to the front door. I've seen it where they go no before they even walk up to the front door. And then you have some repair costs. Everybody's going to have repair costs. Now, if you sell it at auction, I can tell you right now, a lot of people think that it's the last ditch effort in selling a property, and it's not. It is accelerated marketing. You want it gone in 45 days, guess what? There is no due diligence period. There is no, hey, I'm not going to buy it unless there's, these $20,000 in repairs. They have a certain day, a certain time when we start the auction process, and it puts the sellers completely in the driver's seat. And by the way, it gets completely away from all of that other stuff that the NAR got their hand smacked on. So you don't have any of the collusion. You don't have any. It's completely transparent from soup to nuts, all of it. And if you don't want to do any kind of repairs, then we just tell them we're not going to do any kind of repairs. In the due diligence process, people will say, well, we're going to have to take it off the market in order to inspect it, and this, that, and the other. And, whenever somebody puts in an offer through a traditional real estate sale, that's what they say. So just keep that in mind, because that is literally the sole reason why a lot of people get upset. And then pulling permits. Mr. Seller, it's easier for you to pull your own permits than a buyer to pull their permits, because the title clerk or the attorney who closes it is going to be pulling the permits and all the other stuff too. And the permits are going to be the number one thing that stops the sale. The other thing that's going to stop the sale is if you don't disclose material facts. And the other thing that'll stop the sale is if you lie on the material facts piece of it and say, oh, well, the roof I just put on a year ago, and come to find out it's 30 years old and starts leaking. That kind of thing. But anyway, back to the antitrust stuff. There is plenty to decompress about that. To go back, the core of the lawsuit revolved around NAR's rules, particularly those related to sharing and display of property listings. And what we mean by that is the MLS. And the plaintiffs argued that the rules, such as requiring brokers to make a blanket offer or buyer broker compensation when listing a property on multiple listing services, effectively maintained high commission rates by limiting the negotiation competition among brokers. Now, this is where we go. It's like if you go to, and I will name these groups. If you go to Keller Williams, if you go to Century 21, if you go to Coldwell Banker, who were three named in that, they commonly kept commissions within 5 to 6%, right in that range. And the reason is because that was their average. However, amongst the brokers, they would say, well, that's our standard. To me, I list it for what you tell me. If you want to list it for 5-6%, that's fine. If you want to list it for 3-4%, that's fine. If you want me to list it for $50, I may have some pushback on that because it's going to take more to put it into the MLS than the $50. So you have to understand that the profound impact of the collaboration between the two to keep them artificially high versus allowing any kind of competition. Think of it like this. If Hospital A and Hospital B were doing the same thing, Hospital A lowered their price and then Hospital B lowered their price. You see where I'm going? Or gas station A, B, and C all have $3 a gallon gas. B lowers their price to $2.89. How long do you think it takes before A and C lowers it to $2.89 a gallon? Chacho bingo. However, with real estate, they weren't doing that. They were saying, oh, well, that's pretty much our standard or our average. Or this is what our playbook says that we rely on in order to tell us what we are worth. So there's all kinds of training that they do is this is what you're worth. This is what your value is. Tell them how much your value is. Sell them on your value. If they have objections about the pricing, then this is what you do in order to get that 6%. You always want to get the highest amount possible from your sellers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where they got in trouble because they were using high pressure sales tactics and they weren't completely transparent as to what was going on. Now, I'm going to say this, not all of them were like that. Some of them were. It all depends on who you contacted because, I would say it and I would say, do you understand? And some people would be like, well, I'm not quite sure about why we have to do this. It's like, well, here's what if you say, we'll do the thing right now. And what I mean by the thing is we'll role play right now. Hello, Mr. Seller. My name is Matt Price, and here's what our firm standard listing agency incorporated sells your house for is 4%. Now, understand that 4% will go to our firm, and if we have a buyer's agent who's outside of that, we are required by the MLS rules in order to split that 4% to go to the buyer's agent. What's that, Mr. Seller? You don't want that to go to the buyer's agent? Well, I tell you what we can do is we can keep 3% and we can give them 1%. However, we are required to offer something because that's part of the MLS rules. Now, if I came to you and said that, what would you say? You don't care. Well, let me offer to you the value of doing that because if we offer less than X, then it's possible that the buyer's brokers are not going to bring us a buyer for your property and it'll sit there for a longer period of time. That is a high pressure tactic that they use in order to get you to buy into that higher value. Now, if you found out that people were doing that, wouldn't you be pissed? I would. But then again, I'm a cheapskate. I am Scrooge. So if the plaintiffs were successful in pointing this out, then the real estate bubble was going to pop anyway. But with this, now it popped. The legal proceedings take various turns through the entire process, including post-verdict. The specifics of the verdict will have repercussions through the entire industry because it was a federal case because of Sarbanes-Oxley. Now, that being said, subsequent actions taken by the NAR was, well, you keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to fight this. We're going to ask for XYZ, ABC. We're we're going to fight this because we don't think it's right. Okay. But in the meantime, the verdict is the verdict. And the judge says what to do. If the judge says thou shalt not do that, well, then every single real estate brokerage from sea to shining sea has to do what the real estate verdict says, or what the judge says in the verdict. That being said, they can appeal, and then they can stay it. So then you'll have this whiplash thing of, well, now what do we do? Right? So it's going to be a mess for a while. After the verdict, there was 100,000 real estate brokers on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Alignable, MeWe, Parlor, all with their hair on fire because they were just like, I cannot believe that they allowed this to go through. They didn't know what they were doing, this, that, and the other. Well, it's all because they put the CEOs of the brokerages on the stand who says, well, it's not a violation of Sarbanes-Oxley, but they did not offer any evidence or any explanation as to why it's not. However, when you're sitting there saying that, well, offering buyers compensation is not a violation of Sarbanes-Oxley, well, it kind of sort of is, because now you're sitting there saying that you have to have a higher rate in order to split it. So both brokers make money, and both firms make money. Then that's a level of collusion that if I was an auctioneer and I got nailed with that, I would lose my license. So think about that. So, folks, I wanted to give you my opinion on that. Whether the debates and analysis are going to continue on, oh my God, the sky is falling folks are going to be running around with their hair on fire saying the sky is falling. All kinds of commentators and talking heads are going to talk about this until, the end of the world as it is when they come down and say, well, you can't offer buyer commissions. And then the next level of hair burning is going to be coming through. It's just going to compile on and on and on. Will the NAR have to do something in order to ensure that it doesn't happen again? Oh, absolutely. I believe that they're going to have to do it sooner than later. So anyway, folks, I apologize for the long form video, but a lot of people are asking, why is this a problem? Well, because if you take a look at how everything worked out, about 30 years ago, people would walk into a real estate office and they would say, hey, I'm interested in buying a house. And the listing broker would take them around to all of the houses that they had. And then they would, if they found a house that was with another agent, then they would call that other agent to see about, showing the property and whatnot. Well, the idea came along probably about then of, there's no real money into the buyer agency part of this unless you're a listing agent, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then the NAR says, well, you know what's not fair that you have buyer's agents who are running around there expending all their energy and all this other stuff, and they're not being compensated by their buyers. So this is where the co-broke came from, or what we call the buyers and sellers clear compensation. And it wasn't all that clear for some. Some of the new real estate agents wouldn't even go over that. They just said, this is what our standard office deal is, and that's how they went with it. So a lot of people think that, the idea was sound. And at the time, it might have been sound. But when you take a look at the math, the math seemed like it was okay. So here's a perfect example. If I sold a house and my commission was $10,000, well, I would have to split that. I'd have to split that with the buyer. And then I would have to split that with the seller or with the brokerage that I'm with. And then I would have to split it with the IRS, and TDH is Tom, Dick, and Harry. That is everybody who said that here's your $40 a month for MLS fees. This is what $85 a month for being a member of XYZ Corporation. If I take $500 and I divide it by 12, that also included MLS and NAR and all this other fees. So I'm not saying this for poor me, but by the time that you get done, $2,300 is actually what I had to live on. And that would be on a 2.5% commission on a $400,000 house. You see where I'm going with that? So on $10,000, everybody thinks you're getting $10,000 when you're actually getting the $2,300 down here. I figured it out that 80%, if you go down this leg this way, 80% of it is gone. And it starts up here at the 50% mark where I have to split it with the buyer's agent. So now that's why I only present one side. I only represent one side. The other side's going to have to represent the other side. Now, will I have to do a dual agency occasionally? Sure. I don't buy into the idea that I can't tell anybody anything about the property on either side. I think that's a little silly, because if the buyer finds out that there's something that's going on, or there's something that's really something serious about the property, because I can tell you the NAR says, well, if you are in a dual agency agreement, you can't tell anybody anything. Well, that's not true. If you have a buyer who has had a inspection done and there are things on that list that needs to be fixed, and you go to the seller saying, well, this is what the buyer says that they would like to see fixed or needs to be fixed before we can complete this transaction, and the seller says, well, I'll do the first three, but I'm not going to do the last three. And then I go back to the buyer and say, he'll do the first three, but he's not going to do the last three. So what would you like to do? Would you like to go with a reduced price or this, that, as long as I'm being completely transparent with them both, because I'll tell the seller, okay, well, if you're not going to do the last three, they'll probably come back with a lower price. And if I go to the buyer and I tell him, okay, he'll do the first three, but he won't do the last three, what would you like to do? And then give them the options. I can do that all day. Because it's just like dragging them both into the office, sitting them into the chair and saying, okay, you two fight it out. Because according to the rules, I'm not allowed to talk to either one of you. That's bullshit. And I'm going to call them on that because it is bullshit. So anyway, that's why it's important to understand that you have to have people who are high ethical and moral standards versus the I'm going to wear flashy suits, or I'm going to wear basically spandex dresses, or I'm going to drive the most flashiest of cars, or I'm going to do this, that, and the other. For some old hick who still works with, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and all kinds of everything else, youth, trying to make them understand that There is an ethical standard, there's a moral standard that goes into the community that you have to do, and real estate brokers have to be high above that. Auctioneers have to be high above that. And when the auctioneer ethics and the real estate ethics clash, then guess what wins? The one that makes the most sense for the client, the one that makes the most sense for everybody involved in the transaction. The one that, because I'm going to tell you, when I was in auction school and when I was in a real estate school, there was one thing that got beat into my head. And I thought it was funny at the time, but now I understand the whole thing. If it smells like it's fraud, if it looks like it's fraud, if it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, and if it even so much as eats like a duck, then chances are it's a duck. If it looks like fraud, smells like fraud, is written like fraud, the words coming out of the mouth cannot be critically put together in order to make it sound like it's reasonable or with sense, then it's probably fraud. So, that being said, folks, I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. I know this has been a long form video. I don't like doing long form videos because usually I lose my voice. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a call. 919-614-6288. Phone sits right here next to me, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're getting ready to go into the Christmas season, and I hope you all have a safe and merry one. The Venture Crew here, Crew 75. You go to crew75.com and click on their online store. You can order a pork butt for Christmas. That is a, what do you call it? I don't feel guilty about it. It's a healthy push for a great cause. That being said, if I don't see you, I will see you. Matthew Price, 919-614-6288. Don't forget to like, share, cuss at me in the comments. I don't care, because I will try to answer everybody's concerns, comments, or anything like that. Understand that, things happen, and sometimes you just have to be above all of those things that happens, even if it goes negative against you. And but anyway, we can do this. I will see you later.